This is Rebuilders, the leaders we need for the decade ahead. We all know change is a constant. It's just how fast, intensely, and inequitably the change around us is accelerating. As we move into the decade ahead, economic, social, and health inequalities will have created an increasingly uneven and siloed America. These changes didn't start with the events of 2020. They've been accelerating for over a generation. And now, technology, media, and COVID are amplifiers dividing us in ways we've never seen before. Our leaders need to adapt. The future of our communities and our world depend on it. But the ways we thought about leadership in the past will not get us to where we want to go in the future. America is at an inflection point, and if the right leaders show up, we will emerge from the decade ahead stronger and a better nation for everyone. This is Rebuilders, the leaders we need for the decade ahead. Here's your host, Paul Shoemaker.
When I was in first and second grade, growing up in Fort Dodge, Iowa, Snell Crawford Park was just a few hundred feet from my backyard. In the hot, humid summers, I'd take off into those woods, skip my way around the poison ivy, and I'd walk along Soldier Creek. Somewhere along that trail was a small, simple arch bridge with a road running over the creek. I'd sit underneath that bridge and wait for the cars to go rumbling over. And even with a bridge that simple, I was kind of fascinated by how a structure could hold up a whole concrete street with cars speeding across. The condition of bridges in America today, it's sort of a metaphor for the condition of the United States in 2020. There's more than 600,000 bridges all across America, and over a third of them are in need of repair. Nearly 10% of them are structurally deficient and in need of urgent rebuilding. For me, those bridges are a metaphor right now for the state of America and for the challenges that we as a nation, as leaders, are going to face in the decade ahead. We just went through 4 years. No matter what your politics are, they seemed pretty divisive and pretty emotional. For me, the last 4 years, though, they're really just a symptom. And it's really been 20 years of social, economic, and health change that we've been building towards. And where America is today, for me, as has always been the case and always will be the case, leaders are going to make a huge difference. And to me, there's a new kind of leader that we're going to need more of, and I call these people rebuilders. I call them rebuilders because we're going to have to make more of with what we have. It isn't going to be so much about the new as it is the renew. It isn't going to be so much about inventing new things. It's going to be reinventing with what we have. It's a sort of leadership, and it's going to be a decade, I think, ahead for us that we're really not quite used to as a country. And it's going to take a different kind of leader. And I want you to meet them. I call them rebuilders. These last 10 years in particular have had these amplifiers called technology, media, and of course, COVID, that I think have really created some mega challenges for our country. We are divided and siloed like we never have been before. And as daunting as that may sound, I also think it's a unique time for us where we really can move forward as a nation in a way we never have before. But we're going to need leaders that we are not used to finding in all the usual places, with all the usual titles, and they don't look the same, they don't sound the same. I wrote a book, about 38 of them. That book is called Taking Charge of Change, How Rebuilders Solve Hard Problems. And those rebuilders are the people that I want to talk to you about on my podcast. I wrote a book for the first time back in 2015. I started working on book number 2 last year. And what I initially was doing was looking for examples of effective social change. And in that context, as I was looking for sort of what was the formula and what were the algorithms, what I came to notice was really it was about common leadership traits, about the people leading those organizations and leading that change. So I sort of flipped my lens and I looked for the common threads amongst those leaders. And those common threads to me are what became the subject of the story that I want to share with you and start a conversation with you about. My name is Paul Shoemaker, and I've spent the last 30 years across all 3 sectors, public, private, nonprofit. I have seen all kinds of different leaders, and I think I have a somewhat unique vantage point. And over that time, some things have come into clearer focus for me about leadership. There was a handful of traits that I think they all possessed that make them effective leaders for the decade ahead. So I want to talk with you about leadership, not just for you as an individual. That I want to do for sure, but I also want to talk to you about leadership that you are a part of with teams and also for the organization that you're a part of. I want you to be inspired by the stories you hear, and I want to engage you in this conversation. And I hope, of course, you'll get the book along with it. There's always a lot that's talked about in terms of leadership, and we've talked a lot about the problems we're going to face in the decade ahead. I haven't heard too much talk yet about the kind of leadership and the kinds of leaders that we're going to need in this very unique decade ahead for us, and that's what I want to talk to you about. I think there's 3 scenarios for America, and it sort of matches our bridges. We could sort of, slog along and sort of kind of keep going along in the status quo. We could fail. We could fall behind as a country. We could fail and fall behind and let our bridges fall apart. Or we could meet the moment and we could rebuild our nation and we can rebuild our bridges. When I think about the future of the decade ahead, for me, I sometimes think I'm worried about America in the dark of the night, but I'm fundamentally optimistic about it in the light of day. We do live in a much more unequal, siloed, divided, fractured America than any of us could have even envisioned one generation ago. But at the end of the day, what's going to make the difference are leaders and leadership. And what I also believe is not only can we get this right, we have to get this right. We have to find the right leaders for America and for the world. And that's what I want to talk to you about on Rebuilders.